Hey all, and welcome back to Vanquish. In this part we're going to be taking on two more missions. We'll be going through Nightmare and Struggle. And given we sort of had a bit of a nasty accident in the last part towards the end, like we saw Sam get a little bit thrown all over the place and he wasn't really left in the best way, but during that cutscene we saw another nice big meaty Argus mech, and that is what we'll be fighting quite shortly. So yeah, once we get to that, I've got a few notes on the game staff that I'll go through, but in the meantime we've got more hallways to break through, and I don't actually mind this kind of approach for games. And hallways as gameplay, I know that's the sort of thing that people tend to jump to criticise in certain situations because like you're just going forward and the areas start to get a bit samey. And I can see if it's excessive, then yeah, but what I kind of think is as long as there's constantly stuff to do in said hallways, I'm not normally that bothered. Like, I prefer having like linear games disguised a little bit. Like, I will defend linearity as a concept. I like linear games much more so than open world areas. Even like more open world games that still kind of lead you on a path. But in terms of this, like, asking for a disguised linear gameplay experience is more a nicety rather than something I need. If you can just keep me on my toes in this kind of level design, I am perfectly fine with that. And this sticks out to me because a game I've been playing through recently is a game that is absolutely reviled for its hallways, and that is Final Fantasy XIII. Because I actually played that game a good few years ago. Like, I got a few hours in and then got bored of it, but I saw it in the Steam sale and I thought, I'll give this another shot. And yeah, that's a game where the hallways are quite excessive because it's an RPG, and especially during the first like 15 or so hours, like 15-20 hours of it, it is very much a case of hold forward, you get in a battle and yep, you mash the button to beat the battle. It is really button masher in the first couple of chapters. After that it gets into a pretty good like battle system, but in my eyes. But yeah, you just beat the battle and then you move on, you hold forward again. The game's playing itself, John, and like after that it's just rinse repeat. And I still like the game where I am so far, but I can see that being why a lot of people are turned off of it.
Miss me, sweetheart? Jesus, you? I liked you better when I thought you were dead. And I liked you better when I didn't have to hear your shit. Let's go.
But the important part here in terms of Vanquish that we just established in this cutscene is Burns survived. We saw him have quite a nasty accident as well a little while ago, and so both Sam's fine, Burns is fine, the gang's back together, and that's kind of what we needed to be sure of. And like, let's be honest here, they weren't going to kill off either of the main characters this early in the game. Like, Jesus Christ, we're only in the second like act of the game, but still, when everyone has like areas where they fall from the sky and they fall from mechs and they have these giant things knocking us down and you got planes that crash and all that good shit, you know, hype shit, you do still have this thought in the back of your mind that anything could potentially happen. But yes, as I promised, I do have some notes here about the staff of the game and the other projects that they've worked on, which was quite interesting for me to look up because I went into Vanquish not knowing much about it other than it's a shooter from Platinum. So to then do my bit of homework here, it's kind of told me a little bit more about where these guys have done stuff before. So first up, the director, Shinji Mikami. He's the guy who's mostly known for Resident Evil. He worked on 1, and that's both the PlayStation and GameCube versions of Resident Evil 1. He worked on 2, 3, Code Veronica, 0 and 4. I don't see him credited for later Resident Evil games. I don't follow that series. That's a series that I should probably check out one day. We'll see. From what I've seen of the gameplay, it doesn't look like my kind of thing, but then I have had a bit more of an open mind with games in recent times, so I should probably go back and give these games a proper look rather than just glancing past them. But he's also credited for Who Framed Roger Rabbit on the Game Boy. That's actually the earliest game he's credited for, like the earliest game that he worked on. He's also executive producer for Devil May Cry, Ace Attorney, that's the original Game Boy Advance trilogy of Ace Attorney. Also Steel Battalion, Beautiful Joe, which from what I've seen of that, that's like a little platformer with a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek tone to it, which pretty cool. Never played it myself, but whatever. He's credited for Killer 7, which he's the executive producer for that game, and apparently he co-wrote the story with Suda51. He's the director for God Hand, a game that another one that I don't know much about, other than I believe IGN gave it a really scathing review that a lot of people disagree with and are kind of pissed off about. Which, you know, games journalism, enough said. He's the other two games that he's credited for that I have, like, this is just a selection ones that I recognise the name of. There's other projects that he's involved with to my knowledge, but I have also have him down for Shadows of the Damned. Not too sure much about that game, but hey. And he's also director for The Evil Within, which is a game that I kind of like the general environment of. Like, I've only played the demo of that game, and I'll probably give it a proper shot later down the line. I enjoyed what I saw of it, but you know, it's trying not to commit myself to too many games in one sitting. Because like right now I'm playing through Final Fantasy 13, as I said. I've been working on projects for both FlameHisWorld and for the non-commentary channel, like I've been replaying Typing of the Dead for the non-com channel lately. I've also been playing through Sonic 06 for the non-com channel, and I try not to juggle too many games because I've noticed from the past that usually ends up being why I drop certain games. I'll just get a bit overwhelmed because I'm playing too much at once. So yeah, that's just a case of, like, I'll probably go back to Evil Within later down the line. And speaking of The Evil Within, Mikami is also directing the upcoming sequel, The Evil Within 2. Now, one of the producers of the game, Atsushi Inaba, he is the former CEO of Clover Studio, and he's currently the head producer at the development division of Platinum Games. I'm totally not reading that off my notes word for word there. But yeah, he's producer for Vanquish. He's also credited for a fair few games that you might recognise if you follow Platinum closely, like Mad World, Wonderful 101, Metal Gear Rising with Vengeance, Bayo 2, Star Fox Zero, Nier Automata, which is pretty recent. Automata, that's another game that looks pretty cool to me. There's also games like Devil May Cry he worked on, Ace Attorney again, like with Mikami, and also Beautiful Joe. He's also involved with Akami, which looks like a pretty solid RPG. I've watched a playthrough of that, the recent HFC playthrough of that. The other producer credited is someone called Jun Yoshino, and this guy I saw has quite an eclectic variety of credits. So I was just looking up his information on the guy online. He's producer for Phantasy Star Portable, Phantasy Star Zero. It's like a stylized Zero, so I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Also Mad World, Resonance of Fate, Binary Domain, Ratchet and Clank Into the Nexus, and Bloodborne. So like, got a fair few things already. But then it gets interesting because he's also credited with the localization of Sonic Free Riders. That's the shitty Kinect game that barely works. So, like, cool. But then it gets even more bizarre when you look at the stuff that he's given special thanks credit for. Because see if any of these series have anything in common. He has special thanks for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Eyes of Heaven, which actually I've played the previous JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fighting game, All-Star Battle on the PS3. I haven't played Eyes of Heaven, but it looks kind of cool, although I hope it performs a bit better than All-Star Battle did. So he's credited for Eyes of Heaven. He's also credited special thanks for Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, a walking sim game. I have no idea why like he got that special thanks, because you know special thanks tend to be quite vague credits. He's credited for 2 Infamous games, that's First Light and Second Son. I believe they're both PS4 ones, but I don't know the Infamous series that well, so I guess whatever. He's credited for God of War Ascension, and he also, like, that's for special thanks, and he also credited special thanks for Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, which is a really fucking solid racing game. Maybe not got the same charm to it as Mario Kart does, but as a racer, it's like really bloody good.
Intelligence indicates an MSOB team stationed on the colony are setting up a base in the central building.
Meaning there are remaining colony forces?
Communications were cut off before they were able to confirm any survivors.
So yeah, we took down those 2 Argus mechs while I was reading off the info dump, and now we've got a bit of more info dump from the game this time.
What we know right now. Trying to convince me it's worth it, huh?
Gray Fox Field Ops will be providing intel support, sir.
So what we're going to see here is, because I used up a lot of my ammunition during that Argus fight, I have basically nothing now, so I'm just got this awkward moment of scouting around the area, unlocking all the crates and seeing if there's any ammo for the weapons I actually intend to use. And that's the thing, like, I could like reload the game from the level select, but I didn't really want to do that because then I'd have to have an even less subtle edit than the one that was already there. So for the sake of keeping it flowing, I just thought, you know, let's keep it just with a little bit of ammo scouting. I didn't really find much I needed. Like, that's what I was looking for. I wasted all that time scouting around the open area. But no, the heavy machine gun weaponry that I wanted, it was just sat in here the whole fucking time. Like, good job, me.
Gray Fox 1-5. Can you get us to that central building?
Negative, Bravo 6 actual. The central building's in the colony center ring. We just can't get a transport ship in there.
Why not?
An installation on Grand Hills using a directional transmitter to jam all our frequencies. Our nav systems won't work between the northern and central rings.
Then find a way that doesn't use your navigation systems.
There is no
Yeah, that's how this stuff works, Burns, isn't it? Like, just find a way. That gets the problem solved. Burns is a dick. Don't know if you've picked up that's my impression of him from all the times I've said that so far in this playthrough, but Burns is a dick.
Bravo 6 actual, over.
Bravo 6 actual, this is Dev Crew Gold 5. Encountering resistance on Grand...
But as a set piece, I really like these huge elevators. It's something that I'm a bit of a sucker for in media in general. It's a great way of like building up tension while also having that huge sense of scale, because like this could be a diddy little elevator and it'd get you to the same place. But no, we've got this sort of big open area. It's obviously a really high area we're going to, and you kind of get the vibe that they've probably transported all kinds of heavy objects on this because the elevator has to be so big. It makes me think of some of the areas in Sonic Adventure 2, like Prison Lane and Iron Gate, those both inside the Prison Island areas, which in turn I think I may have mentioned this when I did the deep thought of Sonic Adventure 2, I can't remember, but that in turn reminds me of areas from Akira. I seem to recall there being a section in that film where the main cast, or like the sciencey guys in the film, were just sort of going down this huge one. But that's a really wacky film, like Akira. There's a lot I like about Akira. It's a good film. But I also don't really remember much of what happened. I didn't make much sense of what was going on when I was actually originally watching it. It's one of them ones that sort of like Evangelion in a way, but you know, it's slightly different in that respect. But it's like, I just appreciate the grandioseness of it. I think that's a word. I just like really appreciate the general tone of what it is. It's, you know, There's all this sciencey stuff, there's a lot of stuff that I don't necessarily understand, but something about it is enjoyable to me. I don't even know if it is raw enjoyment, it might just be like appreciation. Or maybe it's just, it feels smart, it feels smarter than me, and I kind of respect it for that. I don't know, I'm rambling now, but yeah, so this is another little set piece that we're going to be getting to, because now we've had the big elevator set piece, we're now going to have to work our way vertically ourselves, and that means we're going to have to take these enemies down a few at a time, just to not get too high up and become overwhelmed, because the last thing you want is, in these uphill sections, you're vulnerable, so you don't want to have guys behind you and in front of you shooting at you. You want to have it so that you're in control of the entire situation, so that you can see the guys in front of you and the ones behind you you already know are gone. So that means I'm taking a slightly slower approach here, at least compared to like how I would usually play video games. I'm usually just a barge in, all guns blazing kind of player, but that doesn't work when you're vulnerable. You don't want to do that, because then, you know, you sort of end up dying. And it's sections like this where you really do realise the pure scale of what Vanquish can do in terms of shit happening on the screen. Because there are bullets flying fucking everywhere right now. You got them aiming towards your teammates, aiming towards you. You're shooting your own ones back. Your teammates are shooting at them. And I can see why the Xbox 360 and the PS3 would have struggled with this. I can see why they would have had to have capped this game to 30 frames per second. That is not ideal. But I'm really glad that there's this PC version now that lets you have all this shit going on at once. This is probably more complicated than a lot of modern games, because like this was an older game that's being re-released, but like I don't think as many games now have this much stuff going on screen. A lot of the time they tend to just keep it more simplified, so there's the room and there's the guys who you need to focus on at that particular moment, and there's a few things to focus on at one hit, because they tend to be aware of the fact that if they throw too much in, then that could lead to performance issues. That's the sort of thing that you want to avoid. So I get why that is a design philosophy that kind of works like that, but at the same time, when you can get it working, like when you have a game that's several years old and now being moved on to modern systems, and you can finally unlock the full potential of the game, and you can have all this cool shit going on, I really fucking appreciate that. Like, I will admit, I am kind of obsessive with performance sometimes, for good reason, and that's not something that I see as a fault, but that is the thing that sticks out to me, how well a game performs. I like to have my full unlocked frame rate that is like really beefy, and be able to see a lot of cool shit going on at a high frame rate. And if a game sort of drops in performance, it's super noticeable. And that is one thing that I think tends to get quite overlooked, because people are waking up to frame rate at last. But a lot of the time when people talk about frame rate, at least in like LPs and stuff, it seems to relate to how the game looks. And I will admit, I really do like a high frame rate to look at. Like, that's a bit like, you know, when it comes to just looking at things, some people prefer higher, some people prefer lower. I much prefer looking at a higher frame rate. But in terms of a video game, the benefit of a higher frame rate is far more than just the look of it. It makes you feel more involved with the game, and that's because you get more frames of animation that you can interject with and give your input to, and that makes the game feel much more responsive. So like, say a 60 FPS game, that means you get twice as many frames that you can control as a 30 FPS game. So for every one like frame that you could give a controller input to in a 30 FPS game, that's 2 that you can in a 60 FPS game. I'm playing it over twice that, and that's why this game feels so smooth to me to play, because I can move whenever I want, I can shoot whenever I want. It feels so fucking smooth to play.
Another container is showing movement.
And so there is much more to performance than just the looks. But in terms of the visual side of it, that's a point of contention that a lot of people have when it comes to cutscenes and even film nowadays. Like, I know there was that Hobbit film, which I haven't watched, I've never followed Lord of the Rings or anything like that, but I know one of them was filmed at 48 frames per second, as opposed to the film standard, which is 24. And a lot of people kind of didn't feel too good about that. Like, some people felt a bit weird about it, like it felt off to them. And I know why that is, psychologically and just physically. Because there's a complete myth out there that the human eye can't see above a certain frame rate. That is incorrect. But the human eye does actually have a bit of input into it. Because psychologically we have a sense that if we don't see things completely smoothly, our brain sort of makes things up. This happens in all kinds of psychology. This is one of the things that fucks over even things as severe as like police witness reports and stuff. But what happens there is, if a film is filmed at 24 frames per second, it's a bit jittery. It's not quite a perfect motion imagery. So the brain kind of just fills it in. And what happens there is that automatically disguises a lot of the film's shortcomings. So things like the fact that it's obviously filmed in a set, like that there's certain props being used in certain ways to kind of cover things up. You don't notice that as much when it's at a lower frame rate. Whereas once it goes over that sweet spot, where now your brain doesn't have to fill in the gaps for itself, your brain can just kind of see everything spelled out in front of you, that's when the raw materials flaws become a bit more noticeable. Because when it's a jittery image and you kind of, maybe there's a bit of movement that's not quite so great, or you can kind of see like maybe a bit of background, or the set is a bit obviously fake or whatever, like it becomes a lot more clear when you're watching it at a higher frame rate. That's basically what I'm trying to get at. I was researching this a little while ago, and I find this kind of stuff pretty fascinating. So, like, with games, higher frame rate is always better. Some people will try and shut that down and try to write off the argument, and the thing I say to that is that is not an argument. Like, objectively speaking, having more frames of animation that you can add your input to makes the game more responsive, so higher frame rate is always better for video games. Whereas when it comes to film and watching stuff, that's where it gets a little bit more complex. So, yeah. Although, one thing that I will say is, when it comes to game cutscenes, this is something that you'll notice with a lot of games if you play on PC, in that pre-rendered cutscenes tend to be rendered off at 30 frames, because, especially in cases like this where the original material was 30 frames and they just matched it, but just in general, the industry standard for computer generated animation is either 24, 25 or 30. So you have that, but then in-engine cutscenes tend to run at whatever frame rate you're playing the game at, and that can be a bit jarring when you're in gameplay and then it jumps over to a pre-rendered cutscene, because it's like, whoa, it's slowed down. And that's how you clock on to just how radically different they are to look at. But ladies and gentlemen, that was part 6 of Vanquish. Join me next time for part 7. Bye bye for now.